Ever feel like you're racing against the clock, trying to soak up knowledge, but time just slips away? I get it.
Right.
That's why we do this. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we break down those thought-provoking resources and distill the essential wisdom you need. We do it quickly and keep it engaging.
So today we're diving into a talk by Simon Sinek. It's called 50 Minutes for the Next 50 Years of Your Life. You can find it on YouTube on the Motivation Arc channel.
Yeah, 50 minutes is not a ton of time, and Sinek covers a lot. But in this deep dive, we really want to get to the core of it all. You know, the most powerful ideas, the stuff that you can actually use in your life, like right now.
He does offer a lot of different perspectives, and
Right.
today we're zeroing in on what we think is the essence of his message, the stuff that can have lasting impact.
Exactly. So as you listen to Sinek, one big idea really stands out. It's this idea about focusing on others, on building those really meaningful connections. It pops up again and again. It's kind of like the foundation for a lot of his advice.
Yeah, it really ties everything together. And he uses a really interesting story from Navy SEAL training to illustrate this. So let's talk about that. You'd think, right, that the people who make it through SEAL training, this super intense selection process, they have to be the strongest, toughest guys out there, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Yeah.
Big muscles, never showing any fear.
That's the image we all have, right? But Sinek, he tells the story about talking to a SEAL, and the guy actually says the opposite is true. Like the guys who are always trying to prove how tough they are, the biggest, loudest guys, they often drop out.
Hmm.
It's the same for those leaders who only delegate, they don't want to get their hands dirty, and even those star athletes who haven't really experienced any major failures.
That's so interesting. So who are the people who actually make it then?
Well, the SEAL explained that sometimes it's the guys who are smaller, maybe even a bit scared. What matters, what they all have in common, is this. When they hit their limit, like they are totally spent physically and mentally, they still manage to find a way to help the guy next to them.
Wow.
It's all about this, like, collective resilience, right? It's not about being tough on your own. It's about supporting each other.
Hmm. I like that.
Sinek's point is that real progress, whether it's in some elite military unit or just in everyday life, it comes from helping the people around us. He argues that it's getting harder and harder to do things alone with all the complexity in the world today.
So think about your own life. Who are the people you know you can lean on when things get tough? And just as important, when someone offers you help, are you willing to accept it? Cynic really makes you think about both giving and receiving help, as a strength.
Yeah, and here's something to think about. When you actually ask for help, you might be surprised. The people around you, they might have been wanting to help all along. Maybe they just thought you didn't need it, because you seemed so self-sufficient. Being willing to be vulnerable, asking for help, it shows that you're willing to help others too.
Hmm. That's a good point. And this kind of leads into Sinek's view on leadership. It's definitely not just about, like, being the boss and barking orders, right?
Right. For Sinek, it's much deeper than that. He says the real responsibility of a leader is taking care of the people they lead. Creating an environment where people feel supported, where they feel like their work matters.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, he talks about a leader who gives credit to their team when things are going well, but takes responsibility when things go wrong.
I can imagine that might be a tough adjustment for some people. Are there situations where you think that might not work so well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice idea, this leader taking all the blame, but in the real world, you also need people to be accountable, right?
Right.
So maybe it's less about taking the blame for every single mistake. It's more about the leader focusing on solutions. How can we learn from this together instead of just pointing fingers? But the leader should still shield the team when things go wrong. That's how you build trust.
I see what you mean.
This definitely goes against the grain of that, traditional ego-driven leadership style. If a leader is always passing the buck or taking all the credit, well, that just destroys trust. It's not sustainable. But Sinek's message, it really applies to anything where people work together. Taking responsibility for mistakes, celebrating successes as a team, that makes the whole group stronger.
Makes sense. Now, this idea of caring about your people, it connects with how Sinek views empathy, especially at work. He talks about how to handle it when someone's not performing well.
Right. The usual way is to focus on the numbers, right? The numbers are down, so you threaten people, put more pressure on them. But Sinek says no. A true leader, they approach the person with genuine concern. They ask, are you okay? Is there something going on?
That's a huge shift just by changing the words. It's not just about the work anymore. It's about the person behind the work.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that Sinek argues This approach, this caring about people's lives, it's not just the right thing to do ethically. He says it actually makes the business stronger too. If an employee feels like their boss actually cares about them, they're going to be more engaged, more motivated, and that leads to better results.
Right. People want to feel like they belong, like they're part of something, and that can be really powerful. So let's switch gears a bit. Sinek also talks about something that's so relevant today: social media and how connected we are to our devices.
Yeah, he talks about this dopamine feedback loop. Every notification, every you get, it triggers a little dopamine hit in your brain. And dopamine is the same chemical that gives us pleasure from things like, well, things that can be addictive, like nicotine, alcohol, or gambling.
So basically, he's saying our phones and social media are designed to be addictive, right?
Right.
And he makes a really interesting comparison. We have all these rules about alcohol and tobacco because they're addictive, right? You have to be a certain age to buy them.
Yeah.
But then we give people, especially kids, totally unrestricted access to these technologies that trigger the same dopamine response.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
And Sinek points out that there can be some real downsides to this. Always being plugged in, it might be harder to build those deep, meaningful relationships. You're not practicing those face-to-face social skills.
That's one thing. And he also says it might make it harder to cope with stress. We get so used to getting that instant gratification from our devices that we don't learn how to just, deal with difficult emotions.
He talks a lot about being present, right? Like really being there in the moment. It's more than just a buzzword, according to him.
Yeah, he says being present is not about what you say, it's about how you make the other person feel. They need to feel heard and understood, like really heard. He compares it to meditation, where you focus your attention on one thing and let all those distracting thoughts go. It's the same kind of focused attention you need to bring to your interactions with others.
So how do you actually do that? Be more present.
Well, Sinek gives some really concrete advice, like his rule about no phones in meetings. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no phones in meetings. Interesting. What's the reasoning behind that?
He says it's not about being controlling. It's about creating a space where people can have real conversations, where they can work together effectively. And he makes this observation that a lot of the important stuff happens before the meeting even officially starts. It's
Yeah.
those little chats, asking about someone's family, offering to help with something. Those little moments are how you build relationships, how you build trust. But if everyone's staring at their phones, you miss those opportunities.
It's like those little interactions build the foundation for everything else.
Exactly.
And he also mentioned something a lot of people do: charging their phones right next to their bed.
Yeah, he actually suggests moving your charger to another room, like the living
Yeah.
room or something. The idea is to make it a little harder to check your phone first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Just create a little more space. Be more mindful about how you start and end your day.
Interesting. So all of this, the connection, the empathy, the presence, it all leads to this really big point that Sinek makes about finding your purpose. And it goes way beyond just achieving your own goals, right?
Right. It's much bigger than that. He talks about these athletes and performers who, they achieve their dreams. They win Olympic gold or they star in a hit Broadway show, but then they feel empty. Some of them even get depressed.
Wow.
Sinek says this can happen when your goals are all about you. You reach the goal, and then what? There's nothing left.
You climb to the top of the mountain, and then there's nowhere else to go.
Exactly. So Sinek contrasts these, limited self-centered goals with a deeper kind of purpose. This purpose comes from helping others. He uses these examples that everyone can relate to, like raising kids or acts of love, any act of love, really. These are things where you're focused on someone else, and the effects, they go way beyond just you.
So the impact continues even after you've achieved the initial goal.
Right. And that's what gives it this infinite quality. The giving, the impact, it keeps going.
So what have we learned from Sinek in this deep dive? I think the main takeaway is that true fulfillment, real success, it's not just about what you achieve for yourself.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. What Sinek is saying is that our ability to connect with people, to be empathetic and present, to serve others, that's all tied in with our own sense of purpose and well-being. It's all connected.
It makes you think about how you're spending your time and energy. Are you chasing those individual goals that, have a finish line? Or are you trying to build those meaningful connections, finding ways to help the people around you?
So the question for you, the listener, is this. How can you apply this to your own life, whether it's at work, in your relationships, or just in what you do every day? What if you shifted your focus outward just a little bit? What if you made it a priority to understand others, to support them? Maybe that would unlock a deeper sense of meaning for you, help you deal with life's challenges.
So as you go about your day, here's something to think about.
Yeah.
What one small thing could you do, an act of service, a moment of genuine presence, that could create a ripple effect of positivity? That's something worth pondering for sure.